Hello class, today we're going to talk about simple interest. And as the objective says, it is pretty simple. So let's find out what interest is first off. Interest is the amount of extra money you gain or lose on money invested or borrowed. So we need to understand the idea of invested and borrowed. Invested is when you put money into a bank and the bank makes it grow. Borrowing is whenever you borrow money for something because you don't have enough. All right? So when you invest money, the bank is borrowing your money and will in turn pay you with something called interest. So this is how the bank makes it grow. Okay, they use your money along with everybody else's money. They reinvest it, or they buy something, or they buy some stock or something like that, and they make it grow. Okay, because the more money you have, the faster it can grow. And then they share that with you. When you borrow money from the bank, they make you pay back that amount plus interest. So when you're borrowing, the interest is the money that you have to pay the bank because they let you borrow some of their money. So let's see how we can find that. Simple interest is calculated using a formula. It stands for I is equal to PRT. Well, what do those values mean, or those letters mean? Well, the I stands for interest, okay, or the amount you either earn or the amount that you must pay back on a loan or an investment. The P stands for principal, or the original amount of money you either borrowed or invested. R stands for the interest rate. Now, the interest rate, when you're doing the math and the formula, must be in the form of a decimal. And then T stands for time. And in this particular formula, time does need to be in the form of years. So let's see if we can do a few calculations. Here's our first question. It says we're going to borrow $28,000 at a rate of 7.9% for 3 years. So we write out our formula, and in this particular one, I'm going to call this a formula framework. Okay, so we've got some blanks that we can plug in numbers. Well, the I, the P, the R, and the T are all variables that we can plug information into. We will always know 3 of those, and we have to find the 4th one. So in this particular one right here, we know that the principal amount, or the original amount, is $28,000. Our interest rate is always going to come in the form of a percentage. Okay, and in order to do the math, I need to convert that percent to a decimal. And if you remember correctly, all you have to do is move the decimal 2 places to the left, add any zeros that you might need for empty spaces, and then take off the percent sign. So our percent would be 0.79 or 0.079. Okay, and then our time, or our term in this particular case, is going to be 3 years. So the part that's missing here is the interest. Okay, now this, all it is an algebraic equation. So we put together things that I can put together to solve for the unknown. So in this particular case, I'll take the 28,000, the 0.079, and the 3, and multiply those together. So let's see if we can pull up a calculator here and do that. So we had 28,000, okay, times, and our interest rate was 0.079, 0.079, times, and then our time, or our term, was 3 years. So we multiply that together, we hit equals, and we end up with 6,636. And that would be dollars. So now we can answer this question. What is the interest that's going to be paid on this particular amount? $6,636. And since we're dealing with money, we must put a dollar sign. So then it asks, what is the total amount paid back then? Well, if you borrowed this amount of money, you have to pay back the $28,000 and add to that the $6,636. So what would be the total amount? Well, we would take our $28,000, add to that the $6,636, and we would end up having to pay back $34,636 total. So that would be the amount that I have to pay back. Okay, so let's see if we can do another one here. Okay, so same kind of thing. The question is, what is the interest? So I know that I'm going to be looking for interest. Okay, so our $34,100, where will that go? Into the principal, because that is our original amount that we're starting with. We're going to pay a 4% rate. So in order to do that, we find our decimal. If we don't have one, it's at the end. I move it 2 places to the left. My rate is 0.04. And again, we're going to be using 3 years. Okay, so we go to our calculator. We type in $34,100. We're going to multiply that by our interest rate, which was 0.04. And then we multiply that by our term or our time in years, which is 3. And we find out that the amount is $4,092. So if I were to have borrowed $34,100 at 4% interest and I needed to pay it back in 3 years, I would pay an additional $4,092 on top of that. So what is the total amount paid? Okay, then you would take that $4,092 and you would add back the $34,100, and you would find that the total amount that you have to pay back is $38,192. And that's how we use the interest formula. So let's do 1 or 2 more questions, and then we'll be ready to end the video. Okay, so this one's going to be a little bit different. So this one we got to figure out what's missing. So it says if you earned $480 in interest on a $4,000 investment at a 3% interest rate, how long have you had the investment? Well, if you'll notice here, it says how long have you had the investment? So that means that we're missing time. So time is what's going to be missing in this particular problem. So it says if you earned $480 in interest, well, that's the interest, so that's 480. It says on a $4,000 investment, so that $4,000 was the original starting amount, so that is our principal, at a rate of 3%, so that is going to be 0.03. And now we have to solve for time. Now what I've taught you in equations, that if there's anything that you can put together on a side before we start working, you put it together. So that 4,000 times 0.03, that's something I can put together. So I'll end up with 480 equals, and then I go to my calculator and I multiply 4,000 times 0.03. Now when I'm multiplying this is basically 3%. And I'm looking for what is 3% of 4,000. Well, 3% is a very small amount. So the answer I should get is going to be a small amount. And sure enough, it is 120. Okay. And then we have t. So now that, all it is an equation. Okay, how do I solve for t? Well, I divide both sides by 120. And I end up with t is equal to, and if we go back to our calculator and do 480 divided by 120, we find out that our answer is 4. Okay, our t is 4. Now what does that 4 mean? Well, what was it asking for? It was asking for how long have you had the investment? So that means my answer is actually 4 years. So all you have to do in the simple interest formula is plug in what you know. If there's anything on this right-hand side I can put together first before I do the rest of the math, then you put that together, and you put that together through multiplication, and then you solve for the unknown. And that's how you use the simple interest formula. Until next time.